On May 2nd, 1933, the Inverness Courier printed a small article that would change the Highlands forever. A well-known local businessman and his wife were driving along the North Shore Road of Loch Ness when the water, which was calm just moments before, erupted in front of them. The paper described a tremendous upheaval on the loch, a large, dark body rolling and plunging for nearly a full minute, churning the surface like a simmering cauldron. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving behind only a boiling patch of foam. That single report started a frenzy. Reporters, cameras, scientists, crowds lining the shore. Everyone searching for the creature the world now called Nessie. But here's what most people don't realize. That article didn't start the legend. If you follow the stories back through time, past the newspapers, past the expeditions, past the modern age entirely, the first recorded account of a monster in these waters doesn't even appear in the 1900s. It appears in the 6th century. Long before tourists held binoculars on the shoreline, long before grainy photographs and sonar scans, the people of the Scottish Highlands believed something lived in these waters around Loch Ness. They didn't whisper these stories for entertainment. They believed them as fact. The earliest detailed account comes from the 6th century, in a biography written by monks who recorded real-life events as they understood them. The story begins with a funeral. Columba, a traveling missionary, was walking along the River Ness when he saw a group of Highlanders burying a young man. Now they told him that the young man had been attacked while swimming, dragged under by a creature the locals feared so deeply they wouldn't even give it a name. Columba listened, then did something unthinkable. He ordered one of his followers to swim across the river to retrieve a boat on the opposite bank. The followers hesitated. The locals begged him not to send the man into the water, but one of his loyal followers obeyed and dove in. Moments later, a massive form rising from beneath the dark water, rushing towards the swimmer with jaws opened. Witnesses were screaming, some fell to their knees. Columba stepped forward, raised his hand, and shouted a command. Go no further!
Do not touch the man! Turn back!
And according to the text, the creature stopped instantly, as if yanked backwards by chains. Was it a miracle? An exaggeration? Whatever the truth, the story endured for almost 1,400 years. Columba's command may have driven the creature away, but it didn't erase the fear. For centuries, locals insisted that something large lived in these waters, something capable of killing a grown man, something that appeared suddenly and vanished just as fast. And when you understand the loch, you understand why that fear makes sense, because Loch Ness is one of the strangest freshwater environments on the earth. To understand the Loch Ness Monster, you first have to understand Loch Ness. Now, Loch Ness isn't just a lake tucked away in the Highlands. It's a geological anomaly, a place that seems like it's built for secrets. Loch Ness stretches more than 22 miles through the Great Glen, which is a massive fault line carved by earthquakes and later gouged even deeper by glaciers. Most lakes have shallow edges and a deep center. Loch Ness does not. It drops off sharply and stays deep almost the entire way, more than 600 feet on average, with some trenches plunging past 750 feet. But the depth is only the beginning. The loch is famously dark. The surrounding hills shed something called peat, which is an organic matter that stains the water the color of black tea. So even a few feet below the surface, sunlight completely disappears. Divers that have gone down say that it's like stepping into outer space. Visibility is almost zero. You can wave your hand right in front of your face and never even see it. If something lived down there, something large, it could easily glide through the depths completely unseen. And yet, despite the darkness, Loch Ness is full of life. Atlantic salmon migrate through the Great Glen from the North Sea to spawn. Brown trout and sea trout are targeted by fishermen locally and great for food. Arctic char, a cold water species that thrives in the deep, but is famously hard to catch, also calls the loch home. got European eel, which can grow far larger than most people realize, lamprey, which are ancient jawless fish with a prehistoric look, and pike, which are low-key one of my favorite freshwater fish to eat. On rare winter nights, sturgeon have been rumored to enter through connecting waterways. The ecosystem is cold, deep, but stable. The kind of environment where certain creatures could survive for far longer than anyone expects. Long before biology was studied here, the loch served another purpose.
Below me is the Morriston River, and the bridge that I'm standing on was built in the early 1800s. It was to go over the Morriston River to help the different clans with communication, getting back and forth to each other, as well as moving military equipment to defend their turf. Now, this bridge is still in operation today. The ingenuity is incredible. But when you think back, the earliest sighting of Loch Ness took place in 565 AD. It was more than 1,000 years later before the clans built this bridge. Do you think they were thinking about Loch Ness then?
For centuries, Loch Ness was a critical travel route through the Highlands. It linked settlements, clans, and trading posts. Before paved roads existed, the waterway was the fastest way to transport timber, wool, livestock, and grain. Merchants moved along it, fishermen lived off of it, and armies fought to control it, because whoever controlled Loch Ness controlled the Great Glen. Clans built lookout posts on the hills above it. Royal forces marched through the valley. Rebels used the loch as a shield and a supply line. This wasn't just a lake, it was a battlefield, a trade route, a lifeline. And when places become that important, that central to survival and strategy, someone eventually fortifies it. Someone builds a stronghold that still stands today. When you follow the shoreline of Loch Ness far enough, winding past steep cliffs and quiet coves, and stretches of water so deep that they just look bottomless, you eventually reach one of the most important places in Highland history. A fortress built on a rocky headland, jutting out into the loch as if it's keeping watch. Urquhart Castle. For nearly 1,000 years, this stronghold controlled the Great Glen. It wasn't just a scenic ruin, it was a military prize, a symbol of power in a region where control over the water meant control over everything.
This is the Grant Tower, which is the main housing unit of the castle. The top 3 layers here were all housed for the lord and lady who lived here. And then the bottom 2 was everybody who worked here, did everything else for them. And you can see all the damage here. This castle was originally built on ruins that were a Pictish fort that was built sometime in the 7th century. And then it all went to ruin, but it's a good spot. There's a lot of trade routes along here. So they built up a castle in its place in the 13th century. And then from there, it went back and forth between Scottish owning it and the English owning it during the Scottish War of Independence.
Right.
Way later, during the Jacobite Rebellion, they came along here and said, well, this structure here, we don't want the Jacobites to be able to use it.
And meaning the British were saying that?
Yes, as a potential fort. So they just destroyed it. The people who were here destroyed it. So that way, Jacobites coming in couldn't use it as a defensive position.
Last one out, turn off the lights and drop a bomb while you're at it.
A lot of gunpowder.
Seeing all these, the ground, the stone, everything here was touched by people so long ago. And you can feel the history here. I mean, you can start to picture it coming back to life and all the different decorations and stuff that were probably up, but it's definitely a special place, and it all overlooks Loch Ness.
From these towers, lookouts scanned the horizon for enemy sails. Messengers sprinted along the battlements. Clans fought, defended, and reclaimed these walls through invasion after invasion. The English captured it, the Scots took it back, it was burned, rebuilt, besieged, and abandoned. A witness to every major struggle that shaped the Highlands. And through every chapter of that violent history, the castle overlooked one of the deepest sections of Loch Ness, a stretch of water so dark and so cold, you can't help but wonder what those ancient guards saw from these walls at dawn or dusk. If strange wakes or unexplained splashes ever caught their attention. If the legend we chase today began as something a little bit more subtle, a shape seen from these very stones.
On my left-hand side is Loch Ness, and this road runs right along the side of it. On the left side's Loch Ness, right side is woods. a lot of the sightings don't take place in the water. They actually take place on this road. People driving at night have reported that they've seen the creature leaving the water, going into the woods on the other side of the road, and they almost hit him with the car.
For centuries, Urquhart Castle stood watch over these waters. But as time went on, the battles quieted. The castle fell into ruin, and the loch grew silent again. But then the world changed. In the early 1930s, the North Shore Road along Loch Ness was upgraded. For the first time, thousands of people had a clear, unobstructed view of the water. Cars hugged the shoreline. Windows framed the loch like a moving stage. And when more people began watching the water, more people began noticing things. Small reports at first, a wake with no boat in front of it, or a disturbance out in the middle, a shape surfacing for a moment and then disappearing again. Nobody really called it a monster, not yet. But on May 2nd, 1933, everything changed. That day, the Inverness Courier published a report from a well-known local couple who were driving along the newly improved road. The loch was calm, almost glassy that day, when they noticed a violent motion out on the surface. The paper described a tremendous upheaval in the water. Something large rolled and plunged beneath the surface, turning up the area into a froth, like a simmering cauldron. It lasted nearly a full minute, long enough for the couple to slow the car and watch, long enough for them to be certain they weren't just seeing waves or birds or debris. And then it disappeared, leaving behind only a swirling foam. The Courier's article was straightforward. It was cautious and simple, not sensational, no mythical embellishment, but sometimes it's those simple stories that really hit the hardest. Her name? Aldi McKay, the manageress of the Drummond Rocket Hotel, a well-known, established stopover for travelers long before monsters became famous. The hotel sat near the shoreline, serving fishermen, merchants, and anyone passing along the Highland Road. The original 1933 Inverness Courier article never printed her name or her husband's. It referred only to a well-known local businessman and his wife. But eventually, someone always opens their mouth, and later research and interviews revealed that the woman was Aldi. Respected in her community, known for her straightforward nature, and not really someone who sought out the spotlight. In fact, Aldi reportedly didn't even want her name in the article. She didn't want the attention, and supposedly, she didn't want the publicity for the hotel. She didn't embellish her story. It wasn't like really dramatic. There was no grand claims. She just said what she saw. Ironically, even though Aldi never sought the fame, the sightings she reported changed this region forever. Business for the Drummond Rocket Hotel did in fact increase. Tourists flocked to the shoreline. Reporters arrived in waves. And the building that once served quiet travelers eventually evolved into the Loch Ness Center, the modern museum dedicated to every chapter of the legend of Loch Ness. Now, inside the Loch Ness Center today, you can follow along on how all these sightings sparked something unstoppable. Soon after her account spread, sightings did multiply. Eyewitness reports grew more frequent. Scientists, journalists, and even adventurers flocked to the Highlands, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was moving beneath the surface. But that frenzy was only the beginning, because the very next year, a photograph surfaced, one image that would define Nessie for generations. The year after Aldi McKay's sighting made headlines, the world was shown what many believed was undeniable proof, a photograph. In April of 1934, a London surgeon named Dr. Robert Kenneth Wilson submitted an image to the Daily Mail. He didn't claim it was a monster. He didn't offer an explanation. He simply handed the photo over and let the public decide. The picture showed a pale neck and a small head rising above the surface, casting ripples across the dark water. It immediately became the most recognizable image in all of cryptozoology. The silhouette nearly everyone on Earth associates with Nessie even today. But the truth behind the photograph didn't hold. Decades later, evidence surfaced, revealing the shot was an elaborate hoax. Not a creature at all, but a model mounted on top of a toy submarine constructed by men involved in a Daily Mail expedition who were frustrated by earlier failed searches. Typical news people. You don't have the story, you make it up. But today, the surgeon's photo is just considered a proven fake. Not questionable, not disputed, just fake. But that didn't stop the mystery or the cameras. In 1951, a man named Lachlan Stewart snapped a very different image. 3 large humps breaking the surface near the village of Whitefield. Unlike Wilson's elegant silhouette, these humps looked heavy, solid, and evenly spaced, as if something long and submerged was moving just beneath the waves. At first, the photo was celebrated as the strongest evidence since the scandal of the hoax surgeon's photo, but skepticism followed quickly. Researchers later argued the humps were likely hay bales covered with a waterproof sheet positioned in shallow water for the photograph. Some investigators visited the scene and found that the photo's background matched a shallow shelf, perfect for staging. Supporters countered that the lighting, shadows, and wake patterns don't match floating debris. No definitive proof was ever produced on either side of the story. So while the world accepts the surgeon's photo as a hoax, Stewart's image remains disputed, not confirmed, not discredited, caught in the same limbo Loch Ness always seems to create. These photographs didn't solve the mystery. If anything, they just intensified it. Because if hoaxes existed, then so did the desire to fabricate evidence. But if hoaxes are possible, so was the chance that one day someone would capture something genuine. And in 1960, someone did. And it wasn't a photo, but film. A moving image that became one of the most analyzed pieces of Loch Ness evidence ever recorded. In April of 1960, a man named Tim Dinsdale arrived at Loch Ness with a camera, a notebook, and a very simple goal: watch the water long enough to catch something unusual. For 4 days, nothing happened. Wind, mist, waves, the kind of stillness that the loch is just known for. Then, on the morning he was planning to leave, he noticed a movement. Steady, deliberate movement, crossing the loch.
Saw an object about 250 yards away, as near as I can guess, which came out of the water, sort of. At first I thought it was a cormorant's neck, but then of course you could see that it wasn't a cormorant because it was too big, and it came out like a black snake, like a black anaconda. That's what it looked like. It came out of the water like that, and then it went down, and there was a boil of white foam.
Dinsdale grabbed his 16mm camera and filmed a large, reddish shape gliding across the surface, creating a V-shaped wake that didn't match the behavior of a drifting log or a small boat. When the footage was developed, it quickly became one of the most analyzed pieces of Nessie evidence ever recorded. Over the years, researchers studied the film frame by frame. Now, one modern-day enhancement in particular caught a lot of attention. Some technicians believed they could make out a faint, darker mass beneath the object, almost like a body just below the surface. No clear answer ever emerged, but the film captured something real, something out there on the water, and it fueled a new era of investigation. With so much uncertainty on the surface, researchers knew the next step was obvious: go deeper. Literally.
The Viperfish submersible, crafted and operated by the ingenious Dan Scott Taylor, contributed to the Loch Ness Monster investigation. He took to the waters in 1969 with the submarine, and his goal was actually to use a harpoon to get tissue samples, but not kill the monster. That's the confidence that they had, that he would encounter it in the submarine.
Taylor, a former Navy torpedoman and engineer, wanted to explore the areas of the loch that had never been reached before. With its compact design, the Viperfish allowed Taylor to descend deep into dark sections of the loch that divers couldn't safely access at the time. He conducted dives and surveyed underwater features, hoping to capture something concrete on Nessie. But despite the ambition of the project, the expedition produced no definitive proof. Still, it marked one of the boldest attempts ever made to explore the depths of Loch Ness, moving the search from the surface to the unknown below. The photos, the eyewitnesses, the Dinsdale film, the underwater expeditions, every effort chipped away at the mystery, but none could fully answer it. Which brings us to the people keeping the modern search alive today, the dedicated investigators who made Loch Ness their life's work. Steve Feldham, Adrian Shine, and Alan McKenna. As the decades passed, the search for Loch Ness Monster did not fade. It evolved. New technology arrived, new theories emerged, and new people dedicated themselves to understanding this loch, each with a very different idea of what the truth might be. If you make your way to Doors Beach, you might notice a small converted van parked above the water. The van is home to Steve Feltham. In 1991, Steve walked away from his house, his job, and what most people would call a very normal life. He moved into an old mobile library van and started a full-time vigil at Loch Ness. For more than 30 years, this has been his routine. Watch the water, record what he sees, talk to witnesses, repeat. He has seen strange wakes with no obvious cause, dark shapes at distance, and movements that do not fit the usual patterns of wind or boat traffic. Over time, he has become less convinced that Nessie is a classic dinosaur and more convinced that something natural but unexplained is happening here. Steve does not claim to know what the answer is. He simply knows the question is worth his life's work. On the scientific side of the spectrum is Adrian Shine. Now, Shine is more of a naturalist who has been working at Loch Ness since the 1970s. He leads the Loch Ness Project, which is a long-running research effort that has carried out sonar surveys, ecological studies, and mapping work on the loch and other deep Scottish lakes. He helped lead major sonar operations like Operation Deep Scan in the 1980s, and he designed much of the factual content inside the Loch Ness Center exhibition. Adrian is often described as a sympathetic skeptic. He believes that most of the sightings can be explained by things like boat wakes, water birds, large fish, and tricks of light and distance on dark water. He also points out that the loch does not appear to have enough food to support a giant unknown predator. But even though he's cautious, he still treats witness accounts with respect. And he keeps studying the loch because there are real scientific questions here that are not fully answered. Now, the third modern voice is Alan McKenna, leader of the Loch Ness Exploration, or LNE. Alan runs a volunteer-driven research group that works alongside the Loch Ness Center. He organizes surface watches, night observations, and events like Quest Weekends, where teams spread out around the shoreline and are on boats to monitor the water with cameras, hydrophones, sonar, and more. LNE is built for both believers and skeptics. Some volunteers hope to see a monster. Others are more interested in understanding the loch itself. Alan's approach is simple. Document everything, share the data, and let the evidence speak for itself. In recent years, he has partnered with universities and tech groups to bring new tools to the loch, including advanced cameras and remotely operated vehicles that can explore the depths in ways that would have been impossible just a generation ago. Now, these three trailblazers do not always agree on what is in Loch Ness. One has devoted his life to watching. One has dedicated his career to measuring and explaining. One is building a community that blends both belief and hard data. But together, they show something important. The mystery of Loch Ness is not just about a monster. It's about a place that still makes people stop, stare at the water, and wonder what might be moving just out of sight. And sometimes, the people who know these waters the best aren't the researchers at all. They are the guides who work on the loch day in and day out. Which brings us to a conversation, one we had with a local fishing guide right on Loch Ness.
We're in Loch Ness. You know the question I'm probably going to ask, the reason why people come here to visit. Probably the first question you get every time you get on the boat is, number one, have you seen the Loch Ness Monster? And number two, do you believe in it?
So, yes, I do believe in it.
Okay.
There's nothing to say otherwise. It's not been proved or disproved. Just if you happen to be that lucky person that gets that photo, then you're a lucky person, you know.
Do you have anybody like close to you that's had an experience?
I know of a couple of locals that have had experiences. One experience of my own was I was fishing out at the east end of the loch with a couple of clients one afternoon. Visibility was good, and there was two seals porpoising, chasing one another.
Yeah.
If you weren't too sure what that was, envisage two seals chasing one another.
Yeah. Do you know anyone that you trust that has been out here enough to have an opinion that saw something?
Yeah, I've got a pal that got some video footage of something 2 years ago. down at the west end of the loch. So he was up on one of these tops here, and he's looking down onto the loch. It wasn't a sunny day; it was quite a dull day, but there was 2 kayakers in the loch that was close to it that he used as a reference for scale and size. 2 kayakers were going one in front of the other, and behind them there was like a big wash, like a big wake, something grey moving in front of the wash. He actually lives in the village here of Jimadrocket, and he's a very keen fisherman as well. So he spends a lot of time in the loch.
Yeah.
And he's never seen anything like that before. And he went to the local press with it as well, who kind of confirmed it as like a genuine thing that's not, that they can't explain what it was.
After that interview, I was excited. A video from a local, someone who spends their entire life on the loch, showing a big shape with objects surrounding it that would even verify its size. Now that's the kind of lead you can't ignore. So I waited, and a few weeks later, the guide got back to me. His friend searched his phone, checked old backups, looked everywhere, and then he told us what we did not want to hear. He didn't have the footage anymore. He lost it. And honestly, it feels a lot like NASA accidentally deleting all the information that made it possible for them to go to the moon in the first place. I mean, how does this even happen? A once-in-a-lifetime video just gone? Here's the thing though. I trust that fishing guide. He was genuine, and I spent a lot of time fishing with him for our History Channel series. He wasn't trying to sell us a story, but his friend? The one with the mystery video that suddenly disappeared? That's kind of where my skepticism kicks in. Maybe he really did lose it. Phones break, files get deleted. Heck, I've dropped 2 down ice fishing holes. I get it. People forget things and they forget to back them up. Or maybe he does still have it. Maybe he learned from Aldi McKay, and he doesn't want that kind of publicity. Well, we may never know. Stories, sightings, films, and claims come and go. But eventually, the mystery always circles back to one simple question. What kind of animal could even fit the reports in Loch Ness? I mean, it's got cold water, limited food, near zero visibility, 750 foot of depth. There aren't many candidates. In fact, there's only one creature that people point to, a creature believed to have vanished 65 million years ago. When most people imagine the Loch Ness Monster, they picture one shape. A long neck rising out of the water, a small head, and a broad body moving just below the surface. And that silhouette doesn't match any living creature today. It doesn't fit seals, it certainly doesn't fit sturgeon, it doesn't fit drifting logs or boat wakes, but it does resemble one creature from the fossil record, the Plesiosaur, a marine reptile that ruled the oceans during the age of the dinosaurs. He had a long neck, powerful flippers, a body built for deep water, a predator that fed on fish with surgical precision. So of course, people have wondered, could a plesiosaur have survived, hidden away in Loch Ness? Now, the more you compare a plesiosaur to Loch Ness, the more the cracks start to show. Plesiosaurs were adapted for warm saltwater, not frigid freshwater. Loch Ness sits just above freezing all year long. A cold-blooded reptile in these conditions would barely be able to move. And the loch simply doesn't have the food supply to support such a giant marine predator. Not enough fish, not enough biomass, not really enough of anything. Then there's the biggest problem of them all. A species doesn't survive for 1 million years with a single animal. It would need a breeding population, dozens, maybe even more. And a lake this size would show signs of that, and it really doesn't. So the classic movie version plesiosaur, it doesn't fit Loch Ness. Because while the plesiosaur theory falls apart under biology, the sightings still remain. So if it's not a plesiosaur, then what could create these moments? Some researchers point to the possibility of giant eels, which are far larger than most people expect. Others suggest rare deep water fish moving in patterns that we don't understand. Some believe the sightings come from large sturgeon entering through connected waterways. But out of all the natural explanations, the eel theory is the one that interests me the most. Because unlike plesiosaurs, or giant sturgeon, we know for a fact that eels live in Loch Ness. Not theoretically, not historically, but like right now. European eels migrate into the loch as juveniles, grow in its deep dark water, and eventually return to the sea to spawn. And these eels can reach surprising lengths, far larger than most people would expect. In 2019, researchers conducted one of the most comprehensive studies ever done here. It was an environmental DNA survey of Loch Ness. Environmental DNA works like this. Every animal in the water sheds tiny fragments of itself. Skin cells, mucus, waste, microscopic particles. Scientists collect water samples from different parts of the loch, filter out all the organic matter, and analyze the genetic traces left behind. It's like taking a biological fingerprint of everything living in the lake without actually seeing the animals themselves. And the results were clear. No plesiosaur DNA, no sturgeon DNA, nothing unknown or prehistoric, but strong evidence of eels, and a lot of them. Side note, I did pee in the loch twice while fishing, so maybe there'll be some weird DNA found in the next survey. But either way, I think the idea of many eels present in the loch is very compelling. A large eel moving just below the surface could easily create the long, dark shapes that people describe. An eel twisting in shallow water would look like a multiple humped creature. A big eel surfacing briefly could be mistaken for something far stranger, especially in a low light condition or during heavy waves. But there are problems too. Even the largest European eels recorded don't approach the size needed to explain the big reports. 6 feet, maybe 7, yes, but 20, 30? Nothing in the scientific record supports an eel that size. Not here and not anywhere on Earth. And eels don't typically raise their bodies high out of the water either. They don't lift their heads above the surface like the classic long-necked Nessie silhouette. So the eel theory may explain some sightings, but not all of them. It fits the glimpses, the underwater shapes, the dark streaks beneath the kayaks, the sudden movement just below the surface, but it does not explain the iconic image that made Loch Ness Monster famous in the first place. Now here's where my own thoughts come in, and you can take them or leave them. Scientists tell us that the Earth is billions of years old, and dinosaurs died off 65 million years ago. But there's some scientific findings that challenge that traditional timeline. For example, researchers have discovered soft tissue inside dinosaur fossils, blood vessels, collagen, and structures that shouldn't survive tens of millions of years. Carbon dating has returned many results that don't always match the ages assigned to the layers where fossils are found. And trace amounts of radiocarbon, something that should disappear long before millions of years have passed, have been detected in coal, diamonds, and other materials that we've been told are ancient. So these points don't prove dinosaurs walked the Earth recently, but what they do suggest is the timeline might not be as locked in as we often hear. And if the timeline is shorter than we think, then the idea of a dinosaur surviving somewhere on Earth, in the deep jungles or unexplored river systems or in remote swamps, isn't as impossible as it sounds, which is kind of exciting. That's why on another episode of the Wilderness Chronicles, we dive deep into the Congo to investigate the stories of a creature locals describe as a living dinosaur. If you haven't watched that episode yet, I'll put the link down in the description below. But as for Loch Ness, I want to believe there's something alive in here. I really do. The story is fun, it's mysterious, the Loch Ness is unlike any other lake in the world. But with the water this cold, this dark, and this low of visibility and that little of food, the idea of a massive cold-blooded reptile living here long term just doesn't make much sense. Could there be big eels? Absolutely. Unusual fish? Maybe. Something people occasionally misidentify? Most certainly. But a dinosaur in Loch Ness? As much as I love the legend, as much as I want to believe, the truth is there probably isn't a prehistoric creature living in these freezing Scottish waters. But that doesn't kill the mystery. I can imagine how intensely my mind would be racing if I was swimming across Loch Ness. My imagination would run wild, and that's what the Loch Ness Monster story does. It's the mystery that keeps people coming here and letting their imagination explore. The hope, the wonder, the possibility that something unknown might be just below the surface. And that might be the most powerful part of the Loch Ness Monster story.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Greenway Outdoors YouTube channel. We love making videos like this for you and we hope you enjoy them, but the only way we can make them is with the help of our sponsors. So today's special sponsors that we hope you'll support are Savage Arms, Nosler Ammunition, Trijicon, and Boss Shot Shells.